During a luxurious wedding ceremony, the housemaid interrupts everything with a devastating accusation against the bride. She reveals that the young woman abandoned her own mother on the streets and built her life on lies. Before the stunned guests, a fragile woman appears in a metal cart, and that's just the beginning of a crumbling facade. If this story caught your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. And now, on with the story. The Bradford mansion always had a special glow on Saturday mornings. That's when the sunlight would flood the spacious halls through the French doors, creating a play of light and shadow on the imported marble floors. Maria Sanchez knew every inch of that imposing property on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. She had dedicated more than 10 years of her life to that house, starting as a cleaning assistant in her early 20s and rising to become the trusted head housekeeper, the person who knew everything, took care of everything, and kept that universe running with Swiss watch precision. On that particular April morning, while supervising the setup of the outdoor garden for another one of the family's lavish parties, Maria felt something different in the air. It wasn't just the crispness of a New York autumn, nor the gentle breeze that rustled the manicured hedges in the garden. It was something more subtle, a feeling she had learned to recognize after so much time working for high society families. The scent of change, of secrets about to surface, of hidden truths beginning to crack through their polished veneer. Edward Bradford, her boss for over a decade, had been different in recent months. The 42-year-old businessman, owner of one of New York's largest real estate development firms, had always been a serious but fair man, kind to his staff, respectful and proper. Maria remembered when he had inherited the business from his father, still young and full of doubt, and how she had witnessed his transformation into a confident and successful leader. He had never married, dedicating himself entirely to the business, to international travel, to the endless meetings that filled his calendar. But everything changed when Victoria Monroe entered his life. Maria met Victoria one January evening during a charity dinner Edward hosted at the mansion. The young woman appeared in a navy blue dress that seemed to have been designed especially for her body, with long brown hair falling in perfect waves over her shoulders and a smile that could light up any room. She was a lawyer, Edward explained to the staff, specializing in corporate law, and had been recommended by one of the firm's partners to assist with complex contractual matters. First, Maria saw nothing out of the ordinary. Victoria was polite, friendly, and greeted the staff with courtesy, but there was something in her eyes, a coldness hidden behind the rehearsed smile that set off a small alarm in Maria's intuition. She had learned over the years that truly kind people didn't have to try so hard to appear benevolent. Genuine kindness flows naturally, without calculation or measure. The months passed quickly. Edward and Victoria officially started dating in February, and to everyone's surprise, the relationship progressed at a stunning speed. By March, she was already living in the mansion. In April, Edward announced their engagement. The wedding date was set for the end of June, a grand ceremony that promised to bring together New York's business elite. Maria watched it all unfold with a mix of apprehension and curiosity. Victoria had completely changed the dynamic of the house. In the first few weeks, she remained the friendly, polite woman they had met at the dinner. But gradually, whenever Edward traveled for work, her true personality began to emerge, like a poisonous plant finally finding fertile soil. It was on a March afternoon that Maria witnessed the first clear demonstration of Victoria's true nature. Edward was in Washington, D.C. for a meeting with investors, and the house was quiet. Jenna, one of the younger maids, was cleaning the library when she accidentally knocked over a decorative vase. It was a beautiful piece, but not especially valuable, and it certainly could have been repaired or replaced without much trouble. Maria heard the shouting from the second floor. She hurried up the stairs and found Victoria standing over Jenna, who was crouched on the floor trying to pick up the broken pieces, tears streaming down her face. "You incompetent fool!" Victoria's voice was as sharp as a blade. "Don't you pay attention to anything? Do you have any idea how much this vase cost? Of course not, because people like you have never had anything nice in your lives." "Victoria, it was just an accident." Maria intervened, keeping her voice firm but respectful. Jenna is an excellent employee, very careful. These things happen. Victoria turned to Maria with an expression that chilled the room. Maria, I don't recall asking for your opinion. And since we're on the subject, I think it's time we reviewed a few things around here. Edward trusts you. All too much. Lets things get too lax. That's going to change. In that moment, Maria understood she was dealing with someone dangerous, not because of the aggression itself, which she had encountered in other employers throughout her career, but because of Victoria's ability to completely transform when Edward wasn't around. It was as if two different people inhabited the same body. The charming, loving girlfriend that Edward knew, and the cold, cruel woman who emerged in his absence. Maria helped Jenna clean up the shards and took the young woman to the kitchen, where she made her some tea to calm her down. Don't you worry, she said, holding the maid's trembling hands. I'll talk to Mr. Bradford as soon as he gets back. This won't be swept under the rug. But when Edward returned from DC 2 days later, Maria realized it would be harder than she imagined. Victoria was glued to his side, attentive and affectionate, and when Maria tried to speak with him privately about the incident, Edward listened politely but didn't show the concern she had expected. Maria, I understand your concern, he said, sitting in his office with Victoria beside him, holding his hand. But Victoria already told me what happened. She admits she might have overreacted a bit, but she was stressed with the wedding and all the preparations. You know how these things are. And she already apologized to Jenna, didn't you, honey? Victoria nodded with a sweet smile, squeezing Edward's hand. Of course I did. I felt terrible afterward. Jenna is a lovely girl, and I was completely out of my mind that day. I apologized to her personally and even gave her a little gift to make up for it. It was a lie, of course. Victoria hadn't gone near Jenna since the incident, but Maria realized it would be useless to insist. Victoria was carefully crafting a narrative, shaping reality to her convenience, and Edward, blinded by passion, was accepting everything without question. The following days brought new incidents. Victoria began to set little traps, situations carefully constructed to undermine Maria's credibility. First, it was an expensive piece of jewelry that went missing from the bedroom and mysteriously reappeared in the linen closet, where Maria kept some personal items. Then it was an important document that vanished from Edward's desk and was found by Victoria in one of the files Maria organized. I'm not accusing anyone, Victoria would say in her soft, concerned voice, always in Edward's presence. But these things are happening quite frequently, aren't they? Maybe it's just disorganization, or maybe, well, I don't want to think it's something more serious. Edward began to look at Maria differently. He was still kind and respectful, but there was a shadow of doubt in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Maria felt her heart ache every time she noticed that subtle shift in her relationship with the boss she had served with dedication for so long. It was during one of those restless nights, when Maria couldn't sleep thinking about the whole situation, that she decided she had to do something, not just for herself, but for Edward, for Jenna, for all the other employees who were starting to suffer from Victoria's manipulations. There was something deeply wrong here, something that went beyond a woman who was merely temperamental or stressed about wedding plans. Maria started to watch more closely. She discovered that Victoria had frequent meetings with Robert Evans, one of the oldest partners at Edward's development firm. Robert was a man in his 50s, always impeccably, dressed with a dubious reputation in the real estate market. There were rumors, never confirmed, that he was involved in shady deals, rigged bids, and questionable partnerships. The meetings always happened when Edward was away. Usually in the home office, Victoria had set up for herself in one of the mansion's spare rooms. Maria would notice Robert arriving discreetly, using the side entrance, and staying for hours. Once, while passing through the hallway, she overheard fragments of a conversation through the slightly ajar door. After the wedding, everything will be easier, came Victoria's voice, low but clear. He trusts me. Completely now. He'll sign anything I put in front of him. And what about the old woman? Robert's voice sounded impatient. Are you sure she's well hidden? If anyone finds out? No one will find out, Victoria interrupted firmly. She's far away from here. And Edward truly believes she's been gone for years. He doesn't even look for her, doesn't ask. It was easier than I imagined. Maria backed away from the door, her heart pounding. Who were they talking about? What old woman? And why did Victoria need to keep her hidden? That's when an old memory surfaced in Maria's mind. Mrs. Eleanor, Edward's mother. Maria had only been working at the house for 2 years when she met Mrs. Eleanor, an elegant and kind lady who lived with her son. She had health problems, Maria remembered, something related to her heart, and received constant care. But one day, about 8 months ago, Edward had simply mentioned that his mother had moved to a specialized clinic, a better place for her healthcare needs. Maria never questioned it. It seemed reasonable. Many families did that when elderly parents needed more intensive medical attention. But now, hearing that conversation, something didn't add up. Did Edward never visit his mother? Never mention how she was doing? And stranger still, Victoria had once said, during a dinner with friends, that her mother-in-law had passed away a few years ago, even before she and Edward had met. Why didn't the stories match? And why, if Mrs. Eleanor was really in a clinic or had passed away, were Victoria and Robert talking about keeping her well hidden? Maria felt a chill run down her spine. There was something terribly wrong here, something that went far beyond professional jealousy or personal dislike. Victoria was hiding something big, something directly related to Edward's mother and the family business. That night, Maria made a decision. She would investigate. She would find out what had happened to Mrs. Eleanor, what Victoria and Robert's plan was, and she would find a way to protect Edward before it was too late. But she had to be careful. Victoria was smart, manipulative, and clearly had no scruples. One false move, and Maria could lose not only her job, but also any chance of revealing the truth. The wedding preparations moved forward at a rapid pace. The mansion was in constant motion with florists, decorators, musicians, and wedding planners. Victoria commanded everything with an iron fist, turning what should have been a celebration of love into a meticulously planned military operation. Edward was constantly busy with the business, trusting his future wife to handle all the details. Maria used every opportunity to observe and investigate. She discovered that Victoria kept a small safe hidden in her closet, protected by an electronic keypad. Inside, there were documents that Maria managed to photograph discreetly during a moment of carelessness: contracts, powers of attorney, stock transfers. Everything indicated that Victoria and Robert were orchestrating a plan to take control of the development firm after the wedding, using her position as Edward's wife to manipulate business decisions and eventually push him out of the very business he had built. But the most important piece of the puzzle was still missing. Where was Mrs. Eleanor? What had happened to her? And why did Edward seem to have simply forgotten his own mother? The answer came in a way Maria never would have expected. It was a rainy afternoon in May when she decided to visit downtown Manhattan to run some personal errands. As she passed through the area, around Penn Station, where homeless people took shelter under the awnings of closed shops, she saw an elderly woman sitting in a corner, wrapped in old blankets, with a shopping cart beside her containing all her possessions. Something about that woman caught Maria's attention. Maybe it was her eyes, or the shape of her face, or the way she held her hands. Maria approached slowly, feeling her heart race with an intuition she couldn't rationally explain. "Excuse me, ma'am," Maria said softly, crouching down beside the woman. "Do you need anything? Can I get you a hot coffee? Something to eat?" The woman looked up, and Maria felt the ground disappear from under her feet. Even worn down by time and circumstance, even with her skin marked by the sun and neglect, those were unmistakably the eyes of Mrs. Eleanor. The same greenish hue, the same almond shape, the same gentle expression Maria remembered from years ago. "Mrs. Eleanor?" The word came out as an incredulous whisper. The woman blinked slowly, confused, as if trying to remember something from long ago. "How do you know my name?" "I work for your son, Edward. I used to work for you too, years ago. Oh my God, what happened? How did you end up here?" Tears began to stream down Mrs. Eleanor's wrinkled face, and she started to tell her story in a trembling voice. How Victoria had appeared in her life when she was still living with Edward, introducing herself as a social worker, interested in helping with her health problems. How she had convinced Mrs. Eleanor that Edward would be better off without the burden of caring for a sick mother, that she was holding back her son's life and success. How she had offered a sum of money and promised a safe place for Mrs. Eleanor to live, far away but comfortable. "I believed her," Mrs. Eleanor sobbed. "I thought I was doing what was best for Eddie. I was always a problem for him, with my pills, my appointments, my fears. That young woman seemed so sincere, so concerned. She took me to a boarding house, said she'd be back, that she'd take care of everything. But she never came back. The money ran out. I had nothing left. I didn't know how to contact my son. She told me he had changed his number, that he didn't want to talk to me anymore. I believed her. I thought he had finally gotten tired of me." Maria hugged the elderly woman, feeling rage boil in her chest. Victoria wasn't just a con artist interested in money. She was something much worse, a calculated predator who had purposefully destroyed the bond between a mother and son, who had condemned a frail old woman to live on the streets, all to have total control over Edward and his fortune. "Mrs. Eleanor," Maria said firmly, wiping the tears from her own face, "you're coming with me. I'm going to take you somewhere safe. I'm going to take care of you, and I'm going to make sure your son knows the truth. I promise you that." The old woman hesitated, scared, insecure. What if he really doesn't want to see me? What if that woman was right and I'm just in his way? "She was lying," Maria answered with absolute conviction. "Edward would never stop loving you. He was deceived, manipulated, just like you were. But this is going to end. I'm going to make it end." On that rainy May afternoon, as she helped Mrs. Eleanor into a taxi that would take them to a safe hotel, far from Victoria's eyes, Maria knew she had crossed a line of no return. What had started as vague suspicions had transformed into a clear mission. She would expose Victoria, save Edward from the trap he was falling into, and restore Mrs. Eleanor's stolen dignity. The wedding was just 4 weeks away. Maria had only 1 month to gather all the evidence, create a solid plan, and find the right moment to reveal everything. It would be risky, potentially dangerous, and could cost her her job and her reputation. But as she looked at Mrs. Eleanor asleep in the back of the taxi, exhausted but finally safe, Maria knew there was no other choice. The truth had to be told, and she would be the one to make it happen, no matter the cost. The weeks following her reunion with Mrs. Eleanor were the most intense and challenging of Maria's life. In the mornings, she continued her routine at the Bradford mansion, supervising the staff, organizing the wedding preparations, and maintaining a facade of normalcy. But at night, after everyone was asleep, she transformed into a determined investigator, gathering evidence, documenting conversations, and building a solid case against Victoria. Mrs. Eleanor was staying in a small hotel in Queens, a discreet and safe place where Maria had managed to get a room at an affordable price. Every night after leaving the mansion, Maria would visit the old woman, bringing her food, medicine, and clean clothes. But more than material care, she offered something Mrs. Eleanor hadn't had in a long time: hope. "Are you sure about this, dear?" Mrs. Eleanor would always ask, her eyes filled with a mix of anxiety and longing. "Are you sure Eddie will want to see me? It's been so long. He must be so different now." "He hasn't changed that much," Maria would reply, holding the woman's wrinkled hands. "He's still the good man you raised. Victoria built a wall between you, but she didn't destroy the love he feels for you. I know that. I've seen it in his eyes in the moments when he looks at old photographs. He misses you, even without fully realizing it." It was true. Maria had noticed on a few occasions Edward standing before an old photograph in the library, one where he appeared young beside Mrs. Eleanor. There was a deep sadness in his gaze, an unresolved longing that he seemed to carry without fully understanding it. Victoria had been skillful in making Edward believe that his mother had chosen to leave, that she preferred to be in an institution rather than continue living with him. The manipulation had been subtle, built slowly, planting seeds of doubt and guilt until Edward simply accepted his mother's absence as an unavoidable fact of life. While caring for Mrs. Eleanor, Maria intensified her investigation. She discovered that Victoria kept a secret cell phone, different from the one she used in Edward's presence. It was through this device that she communicated with Robert Evans. exchanging messages about financial transfers, contract manipulation, and future plans for the company. One night, taking advantage of the fact that Edward was asleep and Victoria had left for a supposed meeting with the wedding planner, Maria managed to get into the private office Victoria kept locked. With the help of Ronnie, the family's trusted driver, who had also grown suspicious of Victoria, she photographed dozens of compromising documents: forged powers of attorney, contracts prepared to be signed after the wedding, correspondence with lawyers about asset transfers, and emails, discussing the strategy to gradually push Edward out of his own company's business. But the most shocking discovery came from a notebook Victoria kept hidden at the bottom of a locked drawer. It was a detailed diary of her plan, written with the coldness of someone planning a heist. Every step was meticulously described: how she met Edward through Robert, who had orchestrated the initial meeting, how she studied Edward's tastes and preferences to become the ideal woman in his eyes, how she identified Mrs. Eleanor as the main obstacle and planned her removal, how she would assume legal control, go over the assets after the wedding, and how eventually Edward would be pushed out of his own company under allegations of emotional instability or incompetence, leaving Victoria and Robert as the true owners of the Bradford empire. Maria photographed every page of that notebook, her hands trembling with rage and indignation. This wasn't just a financial scam. It was the systematic destruction of a life, a family, a legacy built on decades of honest work. "We have to report this to the police," Ronnie insisted when Maria showed him the evidence she had gathered. "This is fraud, forgery, breach of trust. She could be arrested for this." "Not yet," Maria replied thoughtfully. "If we go to the police now, Victoria could claim it's all my invention, revenge from an employee who was fired or something. She's a lawyer. She knows how to manipulate the system. And worse, if she realizes we've discovered her plan, she might speed things up, get Edward to sign documents before the wedding, or just disappear with what she's already managed to steal. No. We need to expose everything at once in a way that Edward sees with his own eyes, so there's no way for him to deny or doubt it." "And how do you plan to do that?" Maria took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision she was about to make. "On the wedding day. I'll reveal everything on the wedding day in front of all the guests. It will be impossible for Victoria to hide or manipulate the truth when it's exposed publicly." Ronnie looked at her with a mixture of admiration and concern. "That's very risky, Maria. Victoria isn't the type of person who accepts being unmasked peacefully. She could do something drastic." "I know the risks," Maria admitted, "but I don't see any other way. Edward needs to see the truth with his own eyes, and that will only happen if he's confronted directly with no escape." The days flew by like sand through her fingers. May gave way to June, and the wedding was fast approaching. The mansion was in a constant state of agitation with the final preparations. Victoria had hired a private security team for the event, large, serious men who patrolled the property with a vigilance that seemed excessive for a simple celebration. Maria realized this was part of the plan Victoria was making. Sure, she had total control over who entered and left the mansion on the wedding day. "She's getting paranoid," Jenna commented one afternoon, while helping Maria organize the plates for the banquet. "I've seen her arguing with those security guards, giving orders, talking about keeping unwanted people away from the party. It's like she's planning a military operation, not a wedding." Maria knew exactly why Victoria was so concerned about security. She was protecting herself against potential threats to her plan, ensuring that nothing and no one could interfere at the crucial moment. But what Victoria didn't know was that the biggest threat to her scheme was right there inside the house, watching her every move, waiting for the right moment. Edward, for his part, seemed increasingly distant and pensive. Maria noticed he was losing weight, sleeping poorly, with deep dark circles under his eyes. One morning she found him alone in the garden, staring at the horizon with an expression of profound melancholy. "Good morning, Mr. Bradford," Maria said softly, approaching with a tray holding fresh coffee. "I brought your breakfast. You didn't come down to eat." "Thank you, Maria," he replied, accepting the cup but not drinking. "Sorry for being so distracted lately. It's just, I can't explain it. I feel like something is missing, like I've forgotten something important." Have you ever had that feeling? Maria felt her heart ache. Edward sensed, on some deep, unconscious level, that something was wrong. His instincts were trying to warn him, but Victoria's manipulation had been so effective that he couldn't identify what exactly was causing his unease. Sometimes, our hearts know things our minds haven't yet understood, Maria replied carefully, choosing each word. It's important to listen to those feelings, Mr. Bradford. They're there for a reason. Edward looked at her with a confused expression, as if trying to decipher a riddle. Do you think I'm doing the right thing, marrying Victoria? It was the first time he had verbalized any doubt about the wedding. Maria knew she had to be extremely careful with her answer. If she said something too direct, she could alert him prematurely and ruin the entire plan. But if she said nothing, she would be missing an opportunity to plant a seed of doubt that might help him accept the truth when it was finally revealed. You are an intelligent and honorable man, Maria said finally. I trust that at the right moment you will know exactly what to do. Sometimes the truth reveals itself when we least expect it. Edward nodded slowly, still lost in thought. Before he could respond, Victoria appeared on the terrace, already impeccably dressed for the day, her perfect smile firmly in place. Honey, there you are. I was looking all over for you. We have to go to the venue for the final check on the floral arrangements. Shall we? She linked her arm through his possessively, casting an icy glare at Maria before turning her back. Maria watched them walk away, Edward looking like a puppet being guided by invisible strings. But she had seen something important in that brief conversation. Edward was starting to question, to doubt. Victoria's manipulation, however skillful, was beginning to show cracks. That same afternoon, Maria received a worrying message from Mrs. Eleanor. The old woman was having trouble sleeping, tormented by nightmares and anxiety about reuniting with her son. Maria left the mansion early, lying that she had a doctor's appointment, and went straight to the hotel. She found Mrs. Eleanor sitting on the edge of the bed, her hands trembling, her eyes red from crying. What if he rejects me, Maria? What if he looks at me and feels ashamed? Look at me, I'm old, sick, broken. How can I present myself to him like this? Maria sat beside the old woman and hugged her tightly. You are his mother, Mrs. Eleanor. Nothing, absolutely nothing can change that. And yes, time has passed, circumstances have changed you, but a mother's love for her son and a son's for his mother doesn't get old, doesn't get sick, doesn't get destroyed. He will look at you and see the woman who raised him, who cared for him, who always loved him. Everything else is superficial. But what if Victoria was right? Mrs. Eleanor insisted, her voice breaking. What if I really was a burden? What if he's happier without me? Then why does he still keep your photographs? Why does he stand in front of them with that sad look in his eyes? Why does he seem so lost, as if a part of him is missing? Maria held Mrs. Eleanor's face between her hands, forcing the old woman to look into her eyes. Edward is not happy. He's living a lie, surrounded by a person who doesn't love him, who only wants to use him. And you, whether you're ready or not, are the key to freeing him from this prison. Mrs. Eleanor nodded slowly, wiping her tears. You're right. I know you are. It's just, I'm so scared, dear, so scared. I'm scared too, Maria admitted, but we'll face this fear together. I promise I'll be by your side the whole time. I won't leave you alone. In the days leading up to the wedding, the tension in the mansion grew palpably. Victoria was increasingly nervous, controlling and obsessively watching every detail. Maria saw her arguing with Robert Evans in a low voice in the garden, their sharp gestures indicating a heated discussion. It can't go wrong now, Maria managed to overhear as she casually passed by, pretending to check the table settings. We're too close. If anything gets out of control, nothing will get out of control, Robert interrupted, his voice laced with irritation. As long as you keep Edward in check and make sure those employees don't cause any trouble. The old housekeeper is making me nervous, Victoria admitted. She keeps looking at me in a strange way, as if she knows something. And the driver too. I told Edward we should fire them both before the wedding, but he wouldn't listen. Said they've been trusted employees for years. After you sign the papers as his wife, you can fire whoever you want, Robert replied with a cruel smile. "You can clean out the whole house and hire new people, people who answer only to you. A few more weeks, and all of this will be yours. Ours." Maria moved away before she could be noticed, her heart pounding. She was right about the urgency of the situation. Victoria was already planning to eliminate all the old staff as soon as she had the power. And as for Edward, the plan was clearly to gradually push him away from everything he had built. The night before the wedding, the mansion was silent. All the preparations were complete. The garden had been transformed into a fairy tale setting, with thousands of white flowers, delicate lights hanging from the trees, and an imposing altar where the ceremony would take place. More than 200 guests were expected. Business leaders, politicians, socialites, all of New York's elite. Maria couldn't sleep. She was in her room at the back of the property, mentally reviewing every step of the plan she would execute the next day. She had hidden all the evidence in a safe place outside the mansion. She had arranged with Ronnie to bring Mrs. Eleanor at the right time, keeping her hidden until the moment came. She had even recorded audio of Victoria and Robert discussing their plans, using a small recorder she had bought specifically for this purpose. But there was still one variable that worried her. How would Victoria react when exposed? She was intelligent, calculating, but also increasingly unstable. Maria had noticed worrying signs in recent days. Victoria talking to herself, having disproportionate fits of rage over insignificant things, taking pills she hid from Edward. There was something wrong there, something beyond simple greed. A strange sound from the garden interrupted Maria's thoughts. She got up silently and looked out the window. The moonlight illuminated Victoria's figure walking among the tables set for the next day's banquet. She was in a robe, her hair loose, and seemed to be talking to someone, although she was completely alone. Maria opened the window slightly to hear better. "All planned perfectly," Victoria muttered, gesturing as if arguing with an invisible person. "No one will stop me. No one will ruin this. I deserve this. I deserve it after everything I've been through, all the times I was humiliated, rejected, ignored. Now it's my turn to have everything." She stopped in front of the altar, running her hands over the white flowers. Then suddenly, she began to tear them out violently, throwing them on the ground, stomping on the petals with a furious expression. "But if anyone tries to stop me," she hissed into the night air, "I'll do whatever it takes. Whatever it takes." Maria felt a shiver of fear run through her body. Victoria wasn't just a cold, calculating con artist. There was something broken in her, something dangerous that could explode unpredictably when confronted. For the first time since she decided to expose the truth, Maria questioned if she was prepared for the consequences of that confrontation, not just for herself, but for everyone involved. When cornered, what would Victoria be capable of? But then Maria remembered Mrs. Eleanor living on the streets, abandoned and broken. She remembered Edward being manipulated and deceived, about to lose everything he had. She remembered all the employees Victoria had already humiliated and planned to fire. She remembered the honest empire built by the Bradford family over generations, about to be destroyed by pure greed. No, she couldn't back down now. No matter how dangerous it was, no matter what the consequences, the truth had to be revealed, and she would be the one to make it happen. The wedding day dawned with a perfect blue sky, without a single cloud. It was as if the universe itself was conspiring to create the ideal backdrop for this sham celebration. Maria got up, early before everyone else, and went to the kitchen to prepare breakfast, maintaining her normal routine so as not to arouse suspicion. At 7 in the morning, her hand trembled as she sent the text to Ronnie. "Today's the day. Be ready." The reply came immediately. "I'll be there. Mrs. Eleanor is nervous but determined. Don't worry." Maria put her phone away and took a deep breath, mentally preparing for what was to come. In just a few hours, everything would change. Victoria would be exposed, Edward would discover the truth, and Mrs. Eleanor would finally be reunited with her son, or everything would go terribly wrong, and the consequences would be devastating. But there was no turning back now. The plan was in motion, and she would see it through to the end, come what may. As the sun slowly rose over New York City, illuminating the Bradford mansion and all its hidden secrets, Maria Sanchez prepared for the most important moment of her life, the moment when the truth would finally be revealed, regardless of the price she might have to pay. The morning of the wedding passed in a whirlwind of frantic activity. The mansion was like a giant anthill, with dozens of professionals coming and going, each performing their role in the orchestration of what promised to be the wedding of the year in New York high society. Florists adjusted the final arrangements, uniformed waiters organized the crystal and silver tables, musicians tuned their instruments, and Victoria commanded everything with the precision of a general on a battlefield. Maria watched it all with an apparent calm that completely contrasted with the hurricane of emotions swirling inside her. Every minute that passed brought her closer to the crucial moment, the instant when everything would change irreversibly. She had spent the night almost sleepless, mentally reviewing every detail of the plan, anticipating potential obstacles, and preparing for the confrontation to come. "Maria, I need you to supervise the placement of the chairs in the garden," Victoria ordered for the third time that morning, her sharp voice carrying a poorly concealed tension. "And make sure the security guards are positioned correctly. I don't want any unpleasant surprises today." "Yes, ma'am," Maria replied with the submissiveness Victoria expected, while internally smiling ironically. Unpleasant surprises were exactly what was coming, but not the kind Victoria imagined. It was 10 in the morning when Maria managed a moment alone in Edward's office to make a quick call to Ronnie. "How is she?" she asked in a low voice, constantly glancing at the door to make sure no one surprised her. "Nervous, but holding steady," Ronnie replied. "I took the liberty of taking her to a hair salon this morning. Thought it would help with her self-esteem. You should see her, Maria. With a decent dress, her hair done, she looks like a different person. She still carries the marks of her suffering, but her dignity is returning." Maria felt tears burn in her eyes. "You're a good man, Ronnie. Mrs. Eleanor is lucky to have you helping. We're lucky. When do you want me to bring her?" "The ceremony starts at 4 p.m. Get here around 3:30 and wait at the back gate near the storage shed. I'll meet you there and tell you the exact moment. Everything has to happen at the right time or we'll lose the element of surprise." "Got it. We'll be there." Maria hung up and left the office, nearly bumping into Victoria, who was in the hallway, standing in a way that suggested she might have overheard part of the conversation. "Who were you talking to?" Victoria asked, her eyes narrowed in suspicion. "The florist, ma'am," Maria answered without hesitation, keeping her face neutral. "He had a question about the placement of the orchids on the altar." Victoria studied her for a long moment as if trying to detect a lie. "I hope you understand, Maria, that today is a very important day for me. Anything, absolutely anything that goes wrong will be your responsibility, and I am not a forgiving person." "I understand perfectly, ma'am," Maria replied, holding Victoria's icy gaze without flinching. "You can be sure that this day will be unforgettable." Victoria smiled, interpreting this as an assurance that everything would go as planned. She had no idea of the true meaning behind Maria's words. Noon arrived, and Edward still hadn't come down from his room. Maria grew concerned and went up to check, knocking softly on the door. "Mr. Bradford, is everything all right?" The voice that answered sounded tired and distant. "Come in, Maria." She opened the door and found Edward sitting on the edge of the bed, still in his robe, looking at an old photograph he held in his hands. It was a picture of him as a child, hugging Mrs. Eleanor in a park. Both were smiling at the camera, genuine happiness radiating from the simple scene. "I found this morning at the back of a drawer," Edward said, without taking his eyes off the photo. "I was looking for cufflinks and came across an old box with several pictures of my mother. I don't know why, but I can't stop looking at them." Maria felt her heart race. Edward was being pulled by memories Victoria had tried to erase, his subconscious mind resisting the false narrative that had been imposed on him. "She was a special woman," Maria said softly, approaching. "I remember her well. Always kind, always concerned about everyone in the house." "I let her go so easily," Edward murmured, his voice thick with guilt. "When she decided to move to that facility, I didn't fight to keep her here. I just accepted it. I told myself it was for the best, that she'd be better cared for. But the truth is, it was more convenient for me. For my busy life, my business, what kind of son am I? Maria had to make an immense effort not to reveal the truth right then and there. But she knew she had to wait. If she told him now, in private, Victoria would find a way to manipulate the situation, to create an alternative narrative. The revelation had to be public, undeniable, definitive. "You are a good son," Maria said firmly, "and a good man. Sometimes circumstances lead us to make decisions we later question. But what matters is what's in the heart, and I know you always loved your mother. That never changed." Edward finally looked at her, and Maria saw tears in the corners of his eyes. "Do you think she would know that? Wherever she is now, do you think she knows I never stopped loving her?" "I am absolutely sure of it," Maria replied, and every word was the purest truth. At that moment, the door burst open, and Victoria entered, her face showing barely concealed irritation. "Edward, what are you still doing here? We have hundreds of guests arriving in a few hours, and you haven't even started getting ready." She noticed the photograph in his hands, and something dangerous flashed in her eyes. "What is that? Why are you looking at old photos on our wedding day?" "I was just remembering my mother," Edward answered defensively, quickly putting the photo away as if he were a child caught doing something wrong. "Your mother has been gone for years, honey," Victoria said in a soft voice that didn't match the hardness in her eyes. "You need to stop living in the past and focus on our future together. Today is the beginning of our new life. Please, don't spoil it with melancholy." "You're right," Edward agreed, but Maria noticed the hesitation in his voice. "I'm sorry. I'll get ready. Now." Victoria turned to Maria with a cold expression. "Don't you have work to do downstairs? Or do I need to remind you of your responsibilities?" "I'm on my way, ma'am," Maria replied, leaving the room but not before casting one last look at Edward, who remained sitting on the bed with that expression of confusion and sadness. The next few hours passed at a dizzying speed. The first guests began to arrive around 2 in the afternoon, women in expensive dresses and men in impeccable suits, all eager to witness the union of the millionaire Edward Bradford and the beautiful and mysterious Victoria Monroe. Champagne flowed freely as musicians played soft melodies in the garden, which had been transformed into a tropical paradise. Maria moved among the guests, supervising the service, ensuring everything ran perfectly, but her mind was completely focused on the clock. 3 o'clock, 3:15, 3:30. With every minute that passed, her heart beat faster. At 3:40, she discreetly slipped away from the main area and walked quickly to the back gate. Ronnie was there next to a nondescript car, and when the back door opened, Maria had to stifle a gasp of emotion. Mrs. Eleanor had been completely transformed. The salon had worked miracles. Her grey hair was clean and styled in an elegant bun. Soft makeup covered the marks of time and suffering, and she wore a simple but dignified navy blue dress. The fragility was still there, the eyes that had seen too much suffering, but there was also a renewed strength, a determination that shone through her appearance. "Mrs. Eleanor," Maria said, holding the old woman's trembling hands, "you look beautiful. Are you ready for this?" "I don't know if anyone can ever be truly ready for something like this," Mrs. Eleanor replied with a shaky smile. "But I have to do this. For me, for Eddie, for everything that woman destroyed. Yes, I'm ready." "Then come with me. I'll take you to a safe place where you can wait. At the right time, I'll come get you. Trust me." Maria guided Mrs. Eleanor through the back corridors of the mansion, the ones the staff used and the guests never saw. She settled her in a small guest room on the upper floor, away from the commotion, with a clear view of the garden where the ceremony would take place. "Stay here and rest. A little," Maria instructed. "Ronnie will stay outside the door to make sure no one comes in. When the time comes, I'll come get you myself. Everything will be all right, I promise." Mrs. Eleanor gripped Maria's arm with surprising strength. "Thank you, my dear. Thank you for not forgetting me, for looking for me, for doing this. You are the daughter I never had." Maria hugged the old woman briefly before leaving, fighting back the tears that threatened to fall. There was no time for emotions now. There was work to be done. It was 4 o'clock when the music changed, signaling the start of the ceremony. The guests settled into the white wooden chairs decorated with satin ribbons, forming an aisle to the altar covered in white orchids. The officiant, a family friend, took his place at the center, leafing through his notes. Edward appeared from the right, accompanied by his best man, Robert Evans. Maria felt nauseous seeing the partner smiling broadly, knowing exactly what his role was in this farce. Edward was impeccable in his custom-made tuxedo, but his face showed a pallor and tension that couldn't be completely hidden. The bridal march began to play, and everyone turned to see the bride. Victoria appeared at the end of the aisle, a stunning vision in a French lace gown that had cost a fortune. She held a bouquet of white roses and walked with measured steps, her smile perfect, her eyes fixed on Edward with an expression Maria now recognized as pure greed disguised as love. Maria positioned herself strategically near the altar, at an angle where she could see everything perfectly. Her heart was pounding so hard she feared everyone could hear it. In her hand, hidden in the folds of her uniform, was the cell phone with all the recordings and photographed evidence. In the other hand, the key to the room where Mrs. Eleanor waited. The ceremony began. The officiant spoke of love, commitment, union. Edward and Victoria exchanged glances, he with nervousness, she with triumphant satisfaction. Maria knew she had to wait for the perfect moment. Not too soon, or Victoria might try to turn the situation around. Not too late, or the vows would be spoken and the marriage would be official. If anyone present knows of any reason why this couple should not be joined in matrimony, the officiant said, with the traditional formula, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. It was the traditional moment of silence, that ritualistic pause where no one ever speaks, where the phrase is just an old formality. But Maria had been waiting for this exact moment. It was the perfect cue, the opportunity the ceremony itself provided. But before she could move, something completely unexpected happened. One of the security guards Victoria had hired approached her quickly, whispering something in her ear. Victoria's face changed instantly, the mask of happiness falling away to reveal panic and fury. She glanced quickly around. The garden, her eyes finally meeting Maria's, and in that moment, Maria knew something had gone wrong. Victoria whispered something to Edward, who looked confused, and then she turned to the officiant. "Excuse me, I need to handle something urgent. One moment, please." Without waiting for a reply, she grabbed Edward's arm. "Honey, I need you in the dressing room. It's urgent. Please, come with me now." Edward, completely disoriented by his bride's strange behavior, allowed himself to be dragged back down the aisle through the bewildered guests. Victoria gestured to her security guards, who quickly blocked the way, preventing anyone from following. Maria felt panic rise in her throat. This wasn't part of the plan. Victoria had discovered something, realized something, and was now trying to isolate Edward. What did she intend to do with him, away from everyone? Then Maria remembered the words she had heard Victoria mutter the night before. "If anyone tries to stop me, I'll do whatever it takes." And she also remembered something she had seen in Victoria's closet days ago, something she hadn't fully registered at the time, but which now came back to her memory with frightening clarity. A small box kept at the back of a locked drawer, containing syringes and vials of medication. With growing horror, Maria understood Victoria's contingency plan. If things went wrong, if she felt her scheme was being threatened, she had a way to ensure Edward signed whatever she wanted. Drugs, medication that would leave him confused, pliable, unable to resist or understand what was happening. Without thinking of the consequences, Maria ran through the garden, bypassing the confused security guards. She knew shortcuts through the mansion that Victoria didn't, passages used by the staff. She ran through the kitchens, up the back stairs, and reached the hallway leading to the dressing rooms where the bride and groom had prepared for the ceremony. She could hear raised voices through the closed door of the main dressing room. "Edward, you need to sign these documents now." It was Victoria's voice, hysterical, completely different from the soft, controlled tone she normally used. "Now, before it's too late." "What's going on, Victoria? Why are you acting like this? What are these documents?" Edward's voice sounded scared, confused. "There's no time for explanations, just sign. If you love me, if you trust me, sign now." Maria didn't hesitate. She pounded on the door with force. "Mr. Bradford, open the door!" The silence on the other side was total for a moment. Then Victoria's voice, now laced with pure venom. "Maria, I should have known. Always you, always meddling where you're not wanted." "Open this door now, or I'll break it down," Maria shouted, trying the handle and finding it locked. "Edward, don't listen to her." Victoria was desperate now. "She's trying to tear us apart, to ruin our wedding. She's always been jealous of me from day one." Maria heard sounds of a struggle, something falling, Edward shouting. Without thinking, she backed up and threw her body against the door with all her strength. The lock, not designed to withstand such an impact, gave way, and the door flew open violently. The scene Maria found confirmed her worst fears. Edward was pressed against the wall, clearly trying to get away from Victoria, who was holding a syringe. On the table beside them were scattered documents, pens, and a vial of medication with a label Maria recognized as a powerful sedative. "Get away from him!" Maria screamed, entering the room and positioning herself between Edward and Victoria. Victoria laughed, but it was a humorless sound, filled with hysteria. "You have no idea what you've just done. You have no idea the forces you're challenging. You think you're a hero? You're nothing, just an insignificant housekeeper who doesn't know her place." "I know exactly what my place is," Maria replied with deadly calm, "and my place is to defend the truth. And the truth, Victoria, is that you are not who you pretend to be. Edward, there's something you need to know, something she has been hiding from you from the very beginning." "No!" Victoria shrieked, lunging forward with the syringe still in her hand. But at that moment, the door opened completely and Robert Evans entered, followed by 2 security guards. "Victoria, stop this madness now. The guests can hear everything. This is getting completely out of control." "Then maybe it's time everyone heard the whole truth," Maria said, holding up her cell phone. "Including the truth about you, Robert. About how you and Victoria planned this wedding as a scam from the start." Robert turned pale. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about this." Maria played the recorded audio, and the voices of Victoria and Robert filled the room, clear and undeniable, discussing the plan to take over the company, to manipulate Edward, to gradually push him away from everything. Edward, who until then had remained silent, too shocked to react, finally found his voice. "What? What is this? Victoria, is what she's saying true?" Victoria looked from Edward to Maria to Robert, and then something in her seemed to break completely. She dropped the syringe and began to laugh, a high-pitched, uncontrolled laugh. "True? You want to know the truth? The truth is you're an idiot, Edward, a rich, easy-to-manipulate idiot. You believed every word I said, every fake tear, every empty promise." "Victoria, shut up." Robert tried to intervene, but it was too late. "No. He wants the truth, he'll get it. Yes, it was a plan. Yes, I pretended to love you. Do you think I would care about a man so pathetic, so lonely, so desperate for affection that he fell for the first woman who showed interest? You think I didn't realize how easy you were to control?" Edward staggered as if he had been physically struck. "And my mother? You said she had—" "Your mother is alive," Maria interrupted softly, "and she's here, in this house, waiting to see you." The silence that followed was absolute. Edward looked at Maria as if she had spoken in a foreign language. "What did you say?" "Your mother didn't die, Mr. Bradford. She never went to any facility. Victoria convinced her to leave her life, abandoned her on the streets, and made you believe she was dead. But I found her. I brought her back, and she's here now, ready to show that everything Victoria built is a lie." Victoria let out an animalistic sound of pure rage and lunged toward Maria. But the security guards, finally understanding they had been hired to protect a criminal, held her firmly. Let me go, she screamed, struggling against the men's grip. "You don't know who you're dealing with. I'll destroy all of you." Edward, completely ignoring the chaos around him, looked at Maria with tears streaming freely down his face. "My mother is alive. She's here. Where? Where is she?" "Come with me," Maria said gently, extending her hand to him. "Come and meet her." As they left the dressing room, leaving behind a screaming Victoria, Robert trying to negotiate with the guards, and the Sound of hurried footsteps indicating that other guests were arriving to see what was happening. Maria and Edward walked through the corridors toward the room where Mrs. Eleanor waited, and out in the garden, where 200 guests waited in confusion, where the altar of white orchids stood empty, where the music had stopped and the silence was broken only by the growing murmurs of speculation. An old truth was about to be revealed, and a broken family was about to be reunited. The wedding would never be completed, but something far more important was about to happen. The hallway had never seemed so long. Each step Edward took beside Maria felt like an eternity, his thoughts spinning in chaotic spirals as he tried to process everything he had just discovered. His mother was alive. The words echoed in his mind like an impossible mantra, something that defied the entire reality he had built over the past few months. His mother, whom he believed had left voluntarily, whom he imagined living out her final days in some distant facility, was here, in this house, waiting for him. How? Edward finally managed to articulate, his voice hoarse with emotion. How? Is this possible? How did I not see it? How could I believe she had... Because Victoria is very good at what she does, Maria answered softly as they climbed the stairs. She manipulates, builds narratives, plants doubts so subtly that you don't even realize you're being deceived. It wasn't your fault, Mr. Bradford. It was a carefully constructed trap. They stopped in front of the guest room door. Ronnie was there as promised, and upon seeing Edward, he nodded respectfully before stepping aside. Maria held the doorknob but hesitated for a moment, looking at Edward. She's been through a lot, Maria warned gently. Time has been hard on her. But her essence, her heart, the mother you knew is still there. Remember that when you see her. Edward nodded, unable to speak, tears already streaming freely down his face. Maria opened the door slowly. Mrs. Eleanor was standing by the window, looking out at the garden, where the interrupted ceremony had left the guests in complete confusion. When she heard the door open, she turned slowly, and time seemed to stop completely. Mother and son looked at each other across the small distance of the room. Decades of love, months of pain, and an ocean of unspoken truths filling the space between them. Edward saw the woman who had raised him, cared for him, sacrificed everything for his happiness, but now marked by suffering, aged by abandonment, fragile in a way that broke his heart. Mrs. Eleanor saw her son, the boy she had rocked in her arms, now a grown, successful man, but with eyes shattered by the pain of betrayal and the impossible joy of rediscovery. "Mom?" The word came out as a broken whisper, carrying all the weight of loss, regret, and reborn hope. Eddie. It was the nickname she used when he was a child, a name he hadn't heard in years, and hearing it again, something inside Edward simply crumbled. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and wrapped her in his arms, holding her against him, as if he feared she might disappear if he let go. Mrs. Eleanor sobbed against his chest, her frail hands clutching the back of his tuxedo, and Edward cried, as he hadn't cried since he was a child, the entire veneer of the successful businessman and powerful man melting away to reveal just a son reuniting with his mother. "I'm sorry," Edward repeated like a litany. "I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. I should have looked for you. I should have questioned it. I should have known. How could I let this happen?" "It wasn't your fault, my son," Mrs. Eleanor whispered between sobs. "That woman was very clever. She convinced me I was in your way, that you'd be happier without me. And I, fool that I was, believed her. I thought I was doing what was best for you." "Never, ever." Edward pulled back just enough to hold his mother's face in his hands, looking into her eyes with fierce intensity. "You were never a burden. You were always the most important thing in my life. I lost my way. I let myself be fooled. But I swear on everything that is holy, it will never happen again. I will never let anyone take you away from me again." Maria, watching the scene from the doorway with tears streaming freely down her face, knew she had done the right thing. No matter what happened next, no matter the consequences, this moment of reunion, of restored love, was worth any risk she had taken. A growing noise from the garden reminded them all that a crowd of guests was waiting for answers. Edward wiped his face with the back of his hand, trying to regain some composure, though he still held Mrs. Eleanor's hand as if his life depended on it. "There are over 200 people out there waiting for an explanation," he said, looking at Maria, "and they're going to get one. Everyone is going to know exactly what kind of person Victoria is. And Robert, too. They will pay for everything they've done." "Mr. Bradford," Maria said hesitantly, "perhaps it would be better to let the police handle this. You don't have to expose yourself like this." "No," Edward replied firmly, a new determination hardening his expression. "These people came here to witness what they thought was my wedding. They will witness the truth, all of them. Victoria turned my life into a spectacle, so let her be unmasked in the same way, publicly, definitively." He helped Mrs. Eleanor to her feet, offering her his arm. "Come with me, Mum. Let's show everyone that you're alive, that you're here, that no one will ever be able to separate us again." The three of them descended the stairs together, forming an unlikely but powerful procession. Maria went ahead, clearing the way, with Edward in the center, Mrs. Eleanor holding his arm, walking slowly but with renewed dignity. Ronnie followed a few steps behind, ensuring no one interrupted them. When they reached the garden, the buzz of conversation ceased immediately. 200 pairs of eyes turned to watch New York's most prominent businessman walking with an elderly woman no one recognized, followed by his head housekeeper. The confusion was palpable. Edward guided Mrs. Eleanor to the empty altar, where moments before he had been about to make the biggest mistake of his life. He turned to face the crowd of bewildered guests, and when he spoke, his voice echoed clear and firm through the silent garden. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the confusion and the interruption of the ceremony. I know you all came here to celebrate what was to be my wedding, but before any explanation is given, I want you to meet someone. This is Eleanor Bradford, my mother." A shocked murmur rippled through the crowd. Everyone there knew that Edward's mother had passed away, or at least that's what Victoria had said countless times. Seeing the woman there, alive and clearly real, created a wave of instant confusion and speculation. "Many of you, like me, believed that my mother was no longer with us," Edward continued, his voice growing steadier with each word. "That belief was carefully cultivated by the woman I was about to marry. Victoria Monroe, or whatever her real name is, orchestrated an elaborate plan to isolate me from my mother, to make me believe she had chosen to leave when in fact she was deliberately pushed away and abandoned." The murmur grew, in volume. Edward raised a hand for silence. "For months I was manipulated, deceived, and controlled by a woman who had absolutely no genuine interest in me as a person. Her goal was simple: to marry me, gain legal control over my assets, and eventually, with the help of a corrupt partner, completely take over my company and my fortune." At that moment, Victoria was brought into the garden by 2 security guards, still struggling, her wedding dress torn, makeup smeared, a far cry from the radiant bride of minutes before. Robert Evans followed close behind, pale and clearly trying to calculate an escape route. "There are the responsible parties," Edward pointed. "Victoria Monroe and Robert Evans. Together they plan to destroy me, destroy my family, and steal everything that generations of the Bradford family have built. And they almost succeeded. They would have if not for one woman who had the courage and integrity to seek the truth when everyone else simply accepted the lies." He turned to Maria, who was standing discreetly to the side, trying to blend into the background. "Maria Sanchez, my head housekeeper, the person who has worked in this house for over 10 years, was the one who uncovered the plan, found my mother, gathered the evidence, and risked everything to save me from a trap I didn't even know existed. If there is a hero in this story, it is her." All eyes turned to Maria, who felt her face burn with embarrassment and emotion. Edward walked over to her and, in front of all the stunned guests, took her hands. "Thank you," he said simply. "Thank you for not giving up on me, for not accepting the easy version of reality, for having the courage to do what was right even when it was dangerous. I owe you more than I can ever repay." Maria, with tears in her eyes, just nodded, unable to form words in the face of so much emotion. Victoria, who had been silent until then, finally exploded. "This is ridiculous. You have no proof of anything. It's her word against mine. I love Edward, I always have. This woman is making everything up because she's jealous, because she never accepted me taking her place as the most important woman in his life." "Proof?" Maria turned to her, her voice calm but charged with a cold strength. "You want to talk about proof?" She took out her cell phone and connected it to a portable sound system that had been used for the ceremony's music. Seconds later, Victoria's voice filled the garden, clear and unmistakable, discussing with Robert how to manipulate Edward, how to control the company, how Mrs. Eleanor needed to remain hidden. The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria opened and closed her mouth several times, unable to form words. Her skin was pale, her eyes wild, and finally, she did the only thing left to do. She tried to run, but the security guards held her firmly. One of the guests, whom Maria recognized as a police captain and a friend of the family, rose from his chair and walked toward Victoria. "Victoria Monroe," he said formally, "you are under arrest on suspicion of fraud, forgery, elder abuse, and criminal conspiracy. Anything you say can and will be used against you." Victoria began to scream, a high-pitched, desperate sound that was no longer human. "You can't do this. I'm a lawyer. I know my rights. This is an outrage." "You're a criminal," the captain replied simply, "and you will answer for your crimes." Robert Evans tried to back away discreetly toward the exit, but other guards had already surrounded him. He didn't even try to resist, just lowered his head in defeat, knowing it was all over. As Victoria and Robert were led off the property toward police cars that had been called, the guests remained silent, trying to process the extraordinary drama they had just witnessed. It wasn't every day you saw a wedding interrupted, a criminal conspiracy revealed, and a supposedly dead mother resurrected. Edward returned to Mrs. Eleanor's side, who was sitting in one of the chairs, clearly exhausted from the emotional turmoil. He knelt beside her, holding her hands. "I'm going to take care of you now, Mom," he promised. "I'll make up for all the lost time, all the suffering. You'll have the best doctors, the best treatment, every comfort I can provide, and most importantly, you'll have your son back. Forever." Mrs. Eleanor smiled through her tears, stroking Edward's face. "You were always all I needed, my son. Just being here, seeing you, knowing you still love me, is more than I ever dared to hope for." Gradually, the guests began to disperse, still shocked but understanding that the planned celebration would not happen. But before they left, many approached Edward to offer support, to express relief that he had escaped such a dangerous situation, and to praise Maria's courage. Jenna and the other staff members gathered around Maria, all in tears, hugging her, thanking her for defending not only Edward and Mrs. Eleanor, but all of them who had suffered under Victoria's cruel treatment. "You're amazing," Jenna whispered. "You saved all of us." When the garden finally emptied and the sun began to set over New York, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Edward, Mrs. Eleanor, Maria, and Ronnie remained in the garden, sitting around one of the decorated tables, just absorbing everything that had happened. "What's going to happen now?" Mrs. Eleanor asked softly. "With that woman?" "She will pay for her crimes," Edward answered firmly. "The evidence Maria gathered is irrefutable. She and Robert will face serious criminal charges. Fraud, forgery, elder abuse, conspiracy. They'll spend years in prison if there's any justice in the world." "And the company?" Maria asked. Robert was one of the main partners. "I'll have to do a complete restructuring," Edward admitted. "Review every contract, every decision he was involved in. It could take months, maybe years, to clean up all the corruption. But I'll do it. I'll restore the integrity my father built." He looked at Maria with a thoughtful expression. "And I'm going to need help. People I can truly trust. Maria, you've shown more loyalty and integrity than any executive I've ever worked with. I know your position has always been as head housekeeper, but I'd like to offer you a different role. As my personal assistant, someone to help me make decisions, to keep me honest, to always remind me to look beyond appearances." Maria was taken aback. "Mr. Bradford, I don't know if I'm qualified." "You are more than qualified," Edward interrupted. "You saw through an elaborate lie that fooled everyone. You had the courage to act when it would have been easier to stay silent. You fought for someone who couldn't even defend herself. Those are the most important qualifications there are." Maria looked at Mrs. Eleanor, who nodded encouragingly. "Accept it, dear. You deserve this and so much more." "Then I accept," Maria said finally, a slow smile forming on her face. "It would be an honor." In the weeks that followed that extraordinary day, the story of the interrupted wedding spread throughout New York. The newspapers extensively covered the scandal involving Victoria Monroe and Robert Evans. The investigation revealed that it wasn't the first time Victoria had pulled similar scams. There was a trail of wealthy men she had tried to manipulate over the years, some with more success than others. Formal charges were filed. Victoria faced multiple counts of fraud, forgery, attempted embezzlement, and abuse of a vulnerable elder. Robert Evans was charged with conspiracy, corporate corruption, and attempted fraud. Their lawyers tried to negotiate plea deals, but with the documented and recorded evidence Maria had gathered, the case against them was rock solid. Edward kept his promise to Mrs. Eleanor. He hired the best medical specialists to assess her health, which, though weakened by months on the streets, was not irreparably damaged. With proper care, regular meals, and most importantly the love and support of her son, Mrs. Eleanor began to regain not only her physical health, but also her spiritual vitality. One of the most beautiful rooms in the mansion was completely renovated for her, with all the necessary adaptations for her comfort. Edward hired a private nurse, but he spent every morning and evening with his mother, making up for lost time, rebuilding the bond that Victoria had tried to destroy. Maria took on her new role with the same dedication she had always shown. She discovered she had a natural talent for business, an ability to read people and situations that proved invaluable. Edward trusted her completely, consulted her on important decisions, and often followed her advice. The company's restructuring took months, as Edward had predicted. Questionable contracts were terminated, dubious practices were eliminated, and Bradford Development slowly regained the reputation for integrity that Robert had compromised. It was a painful process involving significant financial losses, but Edward knew it was necessary to build a solid foundation for the future. Jenna was promoted to the new head housekeeper, taking over the position Maria had left, and she hired a new, younger team, creating a fairer and more respectful work environment in the mansion. The old employees who had suffered under Victoria received generous compensation and formal apologies from Edward for not realizing what was happening. Ronnie, the loyal driver who had helped Maria at crucial moments, received a substantial bonus and the family's eternal gratitude. He continued to work for the Bradfords, but now he wasn't just an employee, he was considered part of the family. 6 months after that fateful day, the trial of Victoria and Robert finally took place. The courtroom was packed, the press documenting every moment. Maria was called to testify, and in a firm, clear voice she told the whole story. How she discovered the conspiracy, how she found Mrs. Eleanor, how she gathered the evidence. Victoria remained silent for most of the trial, her appearance drastically changed from the elegant, confident woman she had been. She seemed smaller now, diminished. All the falsehood burned away to reveal only the empty shell of someone who had dedicated her entire life to deceiving others. When the verdict was read, there were no surprises. Victoria was sentenced to 8 years in prison for her multiple offenses. Robert received 5 years. Both also faced civil lawsuits that would leave them financially ruined for the rest of their lives. As Victoria was led out of the courtroom, she looked directly at Maria, who was sitting in the gallery. For a brief moment their eyes met, and Maria saw not anger or hatred, but something that could have been regret, or perhaps just the resignation of someone finally facing the consequences of her choices. A year after that interrupted wedding, the Bradford mansion hosted another celebration. But this time it was something completely different. A simple, intimate party celebrating Mrs. Eleanor's 70th birthday. There were no hundreds of elite guests, just close family, true friends, and the staff who had become part of the family. Mrs. Eleanor was radiant, her face lit with genuine happiness, surrounded by people who truly cared for her. Edward never left her side, attentive and loving. The devoted son, he had always been beneath the manipulation that had temporarily blinded him. Maria watched the scene with deep satisfaction. She had risked everything on that fateful day, not knowing if her plan would work, if she would be believed, if Edward would be able to see through Victoria's manipulation. But in the end, the truth had prevailed, and a family had been saved. "You're deep in thought," Edward commented, approaching with 2 glasses of champagne. "You should be celebrating. None of this would be possible without you." "I was just thinking about how much things have changed," Maria replied, accepting the glass. "A year ago, I was a worried housekeeper watching a tragedy unfold. Today, I'm part of something much bigger." "You were always part of something bigger," Edward corrected gently. "It just took time for everyone to realize it. You saved more than my fortune or my company, Maria. You saved my family. You gave me my mother back. You showed me that there are still real people in the world, people who do what's right simply because it's right, not for personal gain." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching Mrs. Eleanor laugh at a joke Jenna had told, surrounded by people who genuinely loved her. "You know what's funny?" Edward continued. "Victoria was right about one thing, though not in the way she imagined. She said that day would be unforgettable, and it was. But not because it was her perfect wedding day. It was unforgettable because it was the day the truth finally prevailed, the day I got my mother back, the day I learned who the people who truly deserve my trust are." Maria smiled, raising her glass. "To unexpected endings." "To new beginnings," Edward corrected, clinking his glass against hers. And as the sun set over New York once more, painting the sky with golden hues, the Bradford mansion was finally filled with what should have always been there from the start: true love, a restored family, and the peace that comes from living in truth, not in lies. The story of Maria Sanchez, the housekeeper who became a hero, would be told for years in New York high society. Some would see it as a cautionary tale about misplaced trust. Others would see it as an inspiration about courage and integrity. But for Edward and Mrs. Eleanor, it was simply the story of how one extraordinary woman, through her unwavering dedication to truth and justice, saved a family from destruction. And in the end, it wasn't the wealth, the mansion, or the business empire that mattered. It was the love between a mother and son, restored against all odds. It was the trust built through genuine actions. It was the understanding that the most valuable people in our lives are not always the ones who seem most impressive on the outside, but those who stand firm when everyone else gives up. Victoria Monroe had tried to build a castle of lies, but castles of lies always crumble eventually. The truth, on the other hand, builds foundations that last forever, and as the party continued in the illuminated mansion, as genuine laughter filled the air, as Mrs. Eleanor held her son's hand with unconditional love, the truth shone brighter than any lie ever could. The wedding never happened. But something far more important was celebrated in that house: the reunion of a family, the redemption of a son, and the gratitude for an extraordinary woman who had the courage to do the right thing. And that, in the end, was worth more than any elaborate ceremony ever could be. End of story. Hey everyone, we hope the story of Edward, Mrs. Eleanor and Maria touched your hearts. If you were moved by this journey of courage, truth and restored love, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments which moment hit you the hardest. Was it when Maria found Mrs. Eleanor on the streets? The emotional reunion between mother and son? Or maybe the moment the truth was finally revealed in front of everyone? Every day we bring you intense stories like this one. Stories that reveal the deepest parts of the human soul, that make us reflect on loyalty, family, and the importance of never giving up on the ones we love. We'll see you in the next episode, with another story that will stir your emotions and make you believe that the truth always wins in the end.